It is a beautiful day to be alive, and I'm so glad we have this time together. I'm Sana Laybourne, she, her. I am a professor, scholar, connector, and avid reader. I've always loved learning about what's happening in our social world and sharing that knowledge, especially over a good cup of coffee. And so here we are. Each week on Let's Grab Coffee, I catch up with experts from around the world who are investigating our most pressing social issues and common curiosities. Over the next hour, you'll learn about their inspirations, motivations, and of course, what they know about the world around us. Go ahead and grab your cup of coffee and get ready for an insightful and engaging conversation. As you've probably guessed from the name of this show, I do indeed love a good cup of coffee. But can I be honest? I never really gave much thought to where my coffee came from or the history of this delicious beverage. That was until I learned about Cxffeeblack, a Memphis-owned coffee company, and its associated Anti-Gentrification Coffee Club. As a person who loves to support locally owned businesses wherever I am and who is invested in ensuring our local community thrives, I immediately had to know more about Cxffeeblack and their mission. Founded in 2019 by husband and wife team Bartholomew Jones and Renata Henderson, Cxffeeblack is a community-oriented, multi-disciplinary, education-based coffee company that's centered around reclaiming coffee's Black roots. What that means is you can get a good cup of coffee and some education. What I've learned from Cxffeeblack is that coffee originates in Ethiopia. But because of trade and colonialism, there are now coffees that we've come to associate with various parts of the world. So, for example, I'm thinking about coffee from Yemen, which is referred to as Moka, and you might even refer to coffee as Moka. But Moka actually references the port city on Yemen's southwestern coast of the same name. And then there's another name we often call coffee, Java, which is actually coffee from the Indonesian island of Java that was brought there by way of Dutch colonizers. French colonization then brought coffee to Vietnam, and currently Vietnam is the leading producer of Robusta coffee beans. And while each of those countries or regions have their own coffee histories, we lose something when we only know history in part. We become disconnected from ourselves and one another. So today, I'm very excited to share a special episode of the Cxffeeblack podcast where host Bartholomew Jones sat down with Martin Mayorga of Mayorga Coffee and Sarah Wynn of Wynn Coffee Supply to discuss how they honor their roots through their respective coffee enterprises. But before we jump into that conversation, I wanted to actually go back to some earlier conversations with Bartholomew and Renata in order to give us a brief overview of coffee's history and the work that they do with Cxffeeblack. So first up, we're going to hear from Bart with a little bit more coffee history.
I think coffee is one of those things where a lot of people don't really think about where it comes from. I think that's kind of a byproduct of capitalism in a lot of ways, that we don't think about the origin of the things we consume. We just consume them. Their MLK actually has a quote that says, "We do not finish breakfast without being dependent on more than half the world. At the table, we drink coffee that is provided for us by a South American, or tea by someone from China, or cocoa from somebody from West Africa. Before we leave our jobs, we're beholden to more than half the world." That quote has always stuck with me, especially as a Memphian. You grow up going to the Lorraine Motel and going to the Civil Rights Museum. And I don't know if people noticed, but there's actually like a coffee shop sign on the side of the motel. And my imagination would always run, once I learned about the African origins of coffee, if MLK was able to know that, like how that quote might have changed and how he might have connected the coffee he was drinking at that hotel to the legacy of slavery he was trying to affect in Memphis. And, the connection was never made. But in a lot of ways, the idea, the hope, the dream, if you will, of that was the origin of Cxffeeblack. Like, what if we were aware of these connections? What if we had a chance to really inspire and put our efforts into creating a connection here and creating opportunities from that connection? And that's where the genesis. Coffee was discovered, in 850 BC. Caffea Arabica, to be specific. It really should be called Caffea Ethiopica, but we can talk about that later. but yeah, that species of coffee, there are 130 different species that we've discovered at this point. All of them are indigenous to Africa, but that species is probably the most popular species in the world. It's what most people
Mhm.
consume. We've probably seen 100% Arabica on like hotel coffee bags. And that's just letting
Mhm.
you know that it's connected to that first documented species that was discovered in Ethiopia. And there's so many beautiful, rich traditions all over the country and in Sudan as well. Um, but for us, man, the most people's connection to coffee is not from that indigenous Black African perspective. It comes from coffee by way of the colonizers who capitalized on it, right? And so
Mhm.
that puts us fast forward to 1616 in the port of Moka in the country of Yemen with the Dutch, who are trying to build their East Indian Trading Co. And they're looking to add coffee to the cadre of other cash crops that they're exploiting, and that you see even in a lot of our language represents that, right? Like if you've heard coffee talked about as Java, right? That's
Mhm.
because the Dutch people colonized the melanated people of Indonesia, specifically the island of Java, and that was where their coffee plantations were located, right?
Mhm.
And even the language, right? Plantations. Most of us don't associate coffee as a crop that's grown on plantations, but it's heavily tied to slavery at its colonial root. And so that becomes really profitable for the Dutch. The Dutch share it with the rest of the colonizing cartel, as I like to call them. And
Mm.
you get the Spanish and the Portuguese and the English and the French and everybody else in on it. And as they divide up the world and, scramble for Africa and raid the Caribbean, Central and South America, coffee becomes one of those cash crops, one of those very profitable cash crops that is added alongside of sugarcane and tobacco and cotton and some of the more familiar ones. And a big driver of that particular crop of coffee was the African slaves that they stole to grow it. And we know historically, this has been brought out in documentaries like High on the Hog and things like that. But we're dispelling the myth now that slaves were unskilled labor, right? Like these
Right.
slaves were being taken specifically for their agricultural knowledge, right, and their ability to be able to bear that type of labor in their bodies accurately enough to produce a crop that was, viable in the market. And so my suspicion is that coffee was not much different, right? Like that, knowing that coffee has its origins in the African continent, that there was a desire there to bring African descendants to grow this crop because there's some type of ancestral knowledge. I don't have documented evidence of that, but there is at least clear evidence that these slaves, as far as rice and other things were concerned, were being taken for their knowledge to grow these crops. And I wouldn't imagine that coffee would be much different. But we do see, like in Haiti, for instance, in Brazil, for instance, in Jamaica, for instance, where Black slaves become the primary workforce for these coffee plantations. And Brazil, in particular, is pretty much singularly responsible for coffee's current role in the marketplace as this ever-present, very cheap, very available drug or stimulant. And the labor of these slaves is what made coffee become so affordable and what made it become attached to what we consider now to be like a cheap drink or a cheap beverage. And that's because the labor of the people who were growing it was not considered in the cost at its export or import. And so right now, that's a big part of the problem where we are now. But that history is present, and we even see it today with gentrification, where you can't get away from this legacy of anti-Blackness built into the world's most popular Black beverage.
Thanks so much for sharing that brief history of coffee and its origins, and even coffee in its present day, thinking about the industry itself. For most of us who have our daily cup of coffee, we're probably not thinking about all of this context and all of this history that we literally are holding in our hands. And that's why I love Coffee Black and what you're doing with the company so much, because it's not just here's a cup of coffee, but here's the education and the history and being informed about coffee at its origins and even coffee today. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your approach to Coffee Black and even the Anti-Gentrification Coffee Club.
When we started the company, probably the height of the pandemic, we kind of pushed back on a lot of people telling us to start a coffee shop. And I'm gonna land the plane, but I kind of have to start before. My dad's a preacher, I can't help it. So yeah, I think we start in this space where we vehemently don't want to have a coffee shop. We're in the community. My wife and I at this point have been 3-4 years moved into a neighborhood here in Mitchell Heights where we're like, okay, we're mentoring. We're, background on addressing Black flight in communities. Like, man, what does it mean to avoid the brain? My kids are on to avoid the brain drain that happens in Black communities after segregation. And so we're here, we're working, we're mentoring, we're going to church in the community. And I'm talking to my neighbors. They don't have jobs. I'm talking to the community development organization in the neighborhood, which is the Heights CDC. They're trying to address blight. They got this building they used to burn down, and they're just, the CEO Jared is constantly hitting me like, "Yo, man, y'all got to start a coffee shop." I'm going on this long diatribe about how coffee shops gentrify neighborhoods. It's one of the four horsemen of the gentrification apocalypse, alongside craft breweries and Whole Foods and small ladies walking smaller dogs. It's like, yo, we don't want to do that, bro. So you're gonna bring a bunch of, and just the business model is built on commuter traffic. And so like most coffee shops are built on people driving there, not walking there, right? And so I'm literally throwing up the bat signal, like, come in my neighborhood. And when I do that as a business owner, I'm going to be forced to prioritize the needs of my customers. And if my customers are people who don't live here, then I'm decentering my community's needs just as a side effect of that. And so I was like, I don't want to do that. We get to a point where they're like, look, I don't care. We'll do flexible rent. Like, you can give coffee away for free. We have this space. We want to see it being used in the community. So we're like, well, it's not a coffee shop. It's like an anti-gentrification coffee club. It's a coffee club. We just kicking it. You know what I mean? And that became like the headquarters for a lot of what we've done. And it was the genesis of the trip to Africa. So I took a month and just worked there, right? I was like, I want to be here. Yeah, we're going to hire baristas, or we'll train my neighbors to be baristas, but I want to take a month. I'm getting off social media. And I'm just going to be here. I'll be present. I'll be physical. I'll be incarnated. And I would tell this story all the time, similar to the way I've told it to you. And my neighbors would consistently ask me, like, oh, that's amazing. Like, how do they feel about us drinking their coffee? And I'm like, my guy, I ain't been like, I'm talking to people on the internet. We on WhatsApp. Like, I'm not over there. Like, bro, you gotta go. And I'm like, yo, you don't understand how hard it is to leave the country. I'm a Black American. I've never even filed for a passport before. I have no idea what this experience. Like, my family has been in the United States since we got here on the first boat, right? So I haven't. This is all this trauma even behind like leaving and going over the Atlantic Ocean and kind of retracing this journey in an opposite way. And they just wouldn't let me. They was like, nah, that's not gonna work, fam. Like, we gonna keep asking you. And they kept asking me to the point where I was like, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong. Like, maybe my imagination isn't big enough. And I think rooted in what we do is like this idea of a co-generative dialogue, which is like an idea that I learned in my educational classes, get my master's degree about. It's by this dude named Paulo Freire, who worked with indigenous and campesino workers in Central and South America who are adult English language learners. And it's like a different approach on what does it mean to make knowledge or to like name things, right? How do we determine what reality is? And he's arguing that in a lot of ways that should be communal, and it is for people of color. And so I was like, man, if I'm going to be true to this idea here, I need to consider this notion, something that to me was impossible, but my community is telling me it is possible. Yeah. And that led us to launch a GoFundMe. After speaking with a lot of my mentors, they were like, yeah, bro, do it. I did it. In 72 hours, we had $24,000. It's kind of crazy. So it led us to launching this trip to Africa, shooting a documentary, building an all-Black supply chain from Ethiopia, which is the only uncolonized Black country in the world, to Memphis, Tennessee, which is currently, based on recent statistics, the Blackest city in America per capita. And it's just created this crazy experience, man. But it was something that I think was like one of those pivot moments for me, where I was like, as I'm over there, and we can get more into the journey itself if you want to, but like, I'm being so, I'm getting emotional thinking about it, just because there's so prior to going to Africa, everything I was doing coffee at the end of the day was a hypothesis. It was like a what if. It was I'm connecting dots that people aren't connecting. I'm making an argument that hasn't really been made in the industry and definitely not in culture as a whole. And I'm getting a lot of flack for it. I'm getting a lot of support, but you get a lot of gaslighting from white supremacists. You get a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like trolls on social media, a lot of hate emails, and people just being like, you're doing too much. Like this doesn't have to be about race. And it was so crazy going there and seeing how we were received. These people like, you're the first African American we ever met. Where y'all been? You know what I mean? And I'm explaining like, this is where we been. And they were like, well, this is where we been. And it's time to connect, and it's time to build together. It's time to reclaim our pride and our dignity and our products and our heritage and our traditional crops. Like,
To learn more about that trip to Africa and everything that Bart and the Coffee Black team learned, you can check out Coffee Black to Africa. It's a documentary available on YouTube. Part of what Coffee Black does, in addition to the company itself and the Anti-Gentrification Coffee Club, is the barista exchange program. So taking baristas, Black US-based baristas to Africa, and then also bringing baristas from the African diaspora to Memphis and engaging in an educational and cultural exchange. And so while Bart was talking about one of those initial trips to Africa, the team took another trip to Africa as part of that barista exchange. And so now I want to jump into a conversation that Renata and I had about that trip to Africa and some of the things that she and the rest of the team learned.
We went to Addis Ababa and Kigali. So Addis is in Ethiopia and Kigali is in Rwanda. And when we were in Addis, it was the first day, Sana. Okay, we haven't really told this story many places, but it was the first day, and we knew we wanted to meet with some community leaders who were from just different spaces regionally in the rural areas. So farmer, all of, those are the people we wanted to meet. And these certain individuals are elected by people in their community, and they are considered respectable leaders and, spiritual leaders. So we wanted to talk to them about coffee. Like, why is coffee a culture in Ethiopia, as opposed to if I go to Rwanda now, the culture is building, yes, and it is starting to thrive. But how did you guys make it or keep it as it has been for so long? And so we're at this, we went to a hotel called it Ramada. We in America, good old America, call it Ramada. And so we go to Ramada, and so we are on this patio waiting for the leaders to arrive. Down the street, we just see this royal procession. Okay, at least that's how it looks in my eyes. This royal procession of older men coming, just robed and like, they've got all the sash. They're just looking fly, walking down the street, almost floating, as if they were floating. And so they're coming into Ramada, and they're just like greeting us as they're coming in, and just, doing the whole, the head nod, that's universal. And so and yeah, so they go in, and then the women come, in, and I'll tell you a little bit more about each of those shortly. But the women come in and they hug each of us. They're just like, I don't know, it was beautiful. And so we go into this room, and we learn about a 2,000-year old, my Memphis coming out, 2,000-year-old ceremony called Buna Kala. And so Buna is coffee. So Buna Fnagia Hindabina, which means may your house lack no coffee nor peace. So anytime you hear Buna, that is the Afana Romo translation of coffee, basically. And so Buna Kala, the Kala it translates to sacrifice, basically. So the sacrificing of the coffee. So it's a process that they walk through for multiple things. So they do it for births, they do it for weddings, and they do it for conflict resolution, which the birth and the weddings, of course, that makes sense, is more celebratory. I was super interested in the conflict resolution part of the Bunakala, because basically the last time we were there, we got to see our host work through some conflict with somebody who he was like, there was some stuff happening over land, and they met over coffee for hours and resolved it. And so coffee, in my mind, I was like, oh wait, so coffee literally is a part of the process. Like, it's not a byproduct. It's not like an afterthought. Like, it's legit part of the process. And learning this time about Bunakala helped me to understand how that conflict resolution has really, how that has or not even that, how coffee has really become an integral part of that. And so he's telling us the history behind it, and how they have these tales. Is basically like a creation story of its own. Um, oh gosh, I can't remember what they call. I don't remember what they have a big, it's called Big Black God. And I don't know what the actual name, what they call him. Um, but basically he creates man, very similar to the creation story. He creates man, man sins against him, and the tears that he cries over the man, because in this story he had to kill man because he sinned against God, and he cried over the man were what went into the soil and built coffee trees. Which
Wow.
is so crazy to me. So the tears, so they legit see coffee as grown from the tears of God, a gift from him to us as a way to basically atone for the sins of man. So he is very, like I said, similar to the creation story, similar to kind of some of what we believe as far as the incarnation and things like that. But it's crazy because, so thinking of it in that context makes it make sense as to why they would use it in conflict resolution. And so, anywho, going forward, I don't want to keep the men and the women that I mentioned a mystery. So the men are called abagadas, and they are considered like the elders of the communities that they're from. They're elected based off of their merit and the things that they've done and how they represent, people and things like that in their community. Abagadas, and then we have women who are called Adasinkes. The Adasinkes are orbiters. I don't know what word I was trying to say.
I was with you though. I was like,
Arbiter,
okay.
arbiters of justice, not orbiters, arbiters of justice. So they speak up for the voiceless. They are teaching, they're molding, and there also is a spiritual aspect of them. So what we learned is that the women were more of the spiritual leaders in those communities. So the Abagada actually even follow the Adasinkes in spiritual matters, which I thought was super cool and very empowering. And so we see this and we learn that this was cultivated. There's this story about a farmer who he noticed at a certain part of the day that his goats did they know his goats just started turning up at a certain point of the day, and he was just like, I wonder what's happening with my goats. And so he kind of follows them and he finds the coffee tree. And there are lots of versions to this story, but basically one of the prevailing ones are that he finds a coffee tree, he sees this fruit, and he's just like, this must be what they're eating. So, he tries in different ways, eating, like directly ingesting it, just different putting it in things, whatever. And so as the tale goes, he takes it back to his wife, and his wife and the women in that community take it and they cook it, and they take the seed out and they cook the seed, and they grind it. So old school, mortar and pestle. And then they submerge it in water. And of course, there are other methods they did before this, as the legend goes. But that was the first coffee roasting and brewing in Ethiopia, which is wild to me. So yeah, there's so much history behind it. Fast forward to 1616, stolen by the Dutch over a series of, we got the transatlantic slave trade beginning in 1619. We got bodies moving, we got crops moving. And so since we're moving these crops, we've got to have the people who know how to grow these crops to come with the crops. So they take the crop and they take the people, but what they don't take is the culture, and they don't take the blessing, and they don't take the even the spirituality that's behind it, like the belief system, the dignity and all of that comes with it. They just take the product, which is how it gets to 2,000 years later. You're sitting at a coffee shop in anywhere USA, and there's no respect for it. So it's kind of it's definitely an uphill battle to climb, to say, I want to reclaim a history of coffee.
An uphill battle indeed, but one that is so important. And I'm sure for you listening, I mean, how much have we learned this morning already about the origins of coffee, and even thinking about present day, how we might think about coffee differently and how we might consume coffee differently. Now we're going to jump into a very special feature. We are going to listen to a conversation from the Cxffeeblack podcast. Bartholomew Jones got a chance to sit down with Martin Mayorga of Mayorga Coffee and Sarah Wynn of Wynn Coffee Supply to dive more into how each of them, through their respective coffee enterprises, are reclaiming the culture and heritage around specific coffees in the regions and in the home countries where they are from or where they have connections to. So let's jump right in.
Coffee stay black, just like me. Don't need no sugar, don't need no cream.
Here, welcome back to the Cxffeeblack podcast. We're live at the biggest coffee conference in the country. I'm here with two people I greatly admire. We got the OG Martine from Mayorga Coffee. Y'all heard us talk about Martine. You've seen him on the pod before. And we're here with Sarah Wynn from Wynn Coffee Co. Super inspirational, doing amazing things, shaking the industry up. We're all real tired and probably over caffeinated. So it's not going to be a long podcast today, but I wanted to just have this conversation around what does it mean to honor your root. And I think you both do this in really amazing and unique ways. And I'd love to hop in. I want to start with Martine. Just to talk about, again, we've had this conversation a million times, but I think it's interesting to be having it now, especially with all of the doom and gloom, quote unquote, that's happening in the industry. If you don't know, there's a lot of projections about how hard it's going to be for coffee business for the next 4 years. But it doesn't seem like it's hard for you right now. And I think that there's a lot that you've done in the last 10 years, 20 years, 25 years to show and to create a different narrative for you and the community and what you're doing. So for you right now, what does it mean to honor your root? And why do you think that has given you an advantage, you know what I'm saying, over where most people are feeling right now in coffee?
Well, first of all, I think it's funny that people are kind of whining that it's going to be tough for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
It's been tough for about 200 years for other people.
Sheesh. Talk that talk.
I think that's kind of the basis of why I got into this.
Yeah.
I got into this in the 90s, the mid-90s. I mean, you guys are probably not born.
I was born in 1990. Yeah, there we go.
Talk about, things were so far behind then. And it just felt natural to me, right? It's like,
yeah.
Countries. It's what I knew. It's what I loved. I loved the food. And then I started sensing when I came to the U.S., having to assimilate. My dad being on me to speak perfect English. Come off as Latino. Friends coming to the house and being like, oh, your house stinks because my mom was making some delicious food that I thought was delicious. So I went into this almost shame, hide who I was period.
Yeah.
I was a teenager. To then in my 20s, actually not even 20s, late teens, realizing, no, I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of what I have in my heritage. But more importantly, it's been completely obliterated in things like coffee. For me, it was more, let's stop being shameful about who we are in coffee, and I got to get out there and be proud of it and put that pride in the forefront. And frankly, I really believe naively that it would be this whole, like, this moment of, like, the market being like,
Kumbaya.
great, Latino.
Yeah. Sheesh.
Wow.
It was like, yeah.
And this is the 90s, right? Wow.
And, I mean, it's not much different today, if we're going to be honest.
No, I'm just thinking about the 90s was such a weird time. Like for Black America, you had like shows like Martin and Living Single and The Fresh Prince, and there was almost like a cultural renaissance. But behind the scenes, there were so many things that were happening as far as like police brutality, the crime bill being passed. And like it was a weird time in culture because it was almost like people were kind of pro other cultures as long as you like stayed over there and were entertaining. But when it came to actual like equity and issues of justice, people weren't really willing to engage in certain ways. So I'm just thinking about that, you know?
I think Latinos, you know, I think our moment came through music.
Yeah.
Look at the charts now, and you look at...
Yeah, reggaeton.
Yeah, we've become more into the mainstream.
Yeah.
And through food, obviously. I think food, all our cultures have been now appropriated, and, you know, now it's cool to like these foods that 10 years ago were kind of funky to people. But look, ultimately for me, as an individual, everybody's like, you have to find who you truly are.
Yeah.
Put yourself into that place to the world. Right?
Wow.
So for me, if I was going to get into coffee, this was going to be me being the true me, representing my culture, my people, in every sense of it. And not everybody loves it, and enough people do.
Yeah.
And we're doing okay.
Yeah. Okay, right. Just okay. Okay, yeah.
So look, at the end of the day, too, it's about having courage, you know? You have to have courage.
Yeah.
Change things. We need to change things. You know, one of my favorite quotes is Bucky Fuller, who was a scientist, and said, you know, you never change the existing model by fighting it.
Yep.
You change it by creating a new one.
Oh.
That's a bar.
So
You spitting right now.
we're creating a new model.
Yeah.
Pretty freaking simple.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of people would lose a lot of money once it takes place.
Yes.
But it's human, and it's producer, communities, and just people. You know, so
Actual sustainability.
yeah,
Yeah. Not just like a label.
no sticker needed.
Yeah.
Straight human interaction.
But I think the thing that comes to mind when you talk about that is courage. Is another word for courage to me is pride, right? And like on the one that we went, people don't know Martine like was the first person to teach my wife how to roast coffee. So they like flew us out to Baltimore, and like me and my team got to learn to roast coffee with them, and we went inside of y'all's warehouse, and it was so dope to me. And honestly, if I'm being frank, you know, as a Black American, it was almost like a bit shameful in some ways because I saw how open you all were about your pride and being Latino. And like on the wall, like our mission is literally like addressing systemic poverty through like in your community, through this industry that we have. And I was just like, there's Latin pride on the bags.
Music,
And-
blasting.
Bro, and like the staff, all of that. But the crazy part is like when you do that as a Black person, you're almost like taught that to be ashamed of that, to feel like you need to put like oh well, I can't just talk about being Black. I have to put like, but you know, we're not really like upset. But it's like you were just so open about like, I'm Latin American, I'm proud. Your staff was there, and you're flying a Black company out to teach them how to roast coffee, you know, on the love. So obviously, it's not like there was no anti anybody in that, but you were just so open about who you were, and I was like, I have to decolonize the way I think about like what it means to be proud of our origin, what it means to honor our root, because what colonial powers have told us is that when you do that, that's an act of violence, to simply be courageous.
The biggest word I use with my team and my family is be unapologetic.
Yes.
You don't owe anybody any apology for who you are.
Yeah,
They should be thankful to you that you're putting yourself, your true self, in front of them.
yeah,
And that's all we do.
yeah.
And I think that's what the industry needs, and I think that's what the world needs, right? And like if everybody brings the best of themselves,
It's like single origin coffee. If each of us brings the best out of our own origin, then the world's palate is richer for that. But like, again, there's this kind of like subliminal messaging, and you doing that, bro, was just so amazing. Like it was so, and honestly, it inspires so much of what we do. You building an all Latino supply chain obviously was like, man, can we create something like this for Black people? Because we haven't had it. And I think it's seeing this happen in so many communities. Obviously you've pioneered in the Latin American industry and the industry in general. It's inspired us, and like seeing what you're doing as well, Sarah, like such an innovative process. Like you guys is marketing, your storytelling, your sourcing is like so disruptive, and you guys, there's so much joy in your brand. You know what I'm saying? Would you mind speaking to that? What does it mean to honor your root? And how has that impacted the way that you tell your story and even the types of products that you release to the market?
Yeah, for sure. Like for us, like I had no background in coffee. Like I had like no like intention to get into coffee. I felt compelled and called to start my company because I saw such a deep injustice happening in my community and in coffee in general. So like when I had learned that Vietnam is the second largest producer of coffee in the world and also the number one producer of Robusta in the world, but yet like literally was rendered invisible in the coffee conversation and like barred from like access to like premium specialty coffee production, I was like, this is just messed up, right? And so for me, it was like layers of like, okay, so we had this entire segment, one, Vietnam, number two, Robusta as a species, as a community, being rendered invisible, but then not given the opportunity to like elevate. Yeah. But meanwhile, we're seeing this entire segment of like values of like care, investment, innovation, transparency, stability. But this like values application was very inconsistent. People were literally saying like, certain communities are deserving of these values, aka if you grow Arabica, and if you don't grow Arabica, you're not deserving of these values. So then what I was seeing with Vietnam was essentially Vietnam as an origin, as a coffee industry, but then also Robusta grown communities worldwide in all countries were pretty much trapped to economic exploitation. The industry was saying, if you grow Robusta, then you're pretty much only good for like the commodity market, right? Which means you can't elevate your coffee, your production, your pricing, or your livelihoods. And so for me, I felt like that was just like so hypocritical. It was wrong, right? Yeah. And because my family's from Vietnam, I was like, well, I'll start with my culture, my roots. And because Vietnam is also a major producer of Robusta, I was like, if we could just like focus on the species, it would actually help elevate communities worldwide. Yeah. So it really started like honoring like your like our like my roots. It was about just like helping to bring visibility to this issue so that we can like connect with the communities behind the bean because this industry was so deeply invisibilized in this industry. Yeah. And so that was kind of like that was really what called me, because honestly this industry is so difficult, as you probably know, Mari. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like it's so difficult. I was like, this is wrong, right? And like I just want to expand on what you said earlier, Martin, about like having the courage to challenge systems as they are. And like that's definitely part of it, because like when I first started like in 2016 and then like really launched 2018, we were really entering and challenging this dominant narrative of like Arabica is superior, Robusta is inferior, like Vietnam is cheap, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to have the courage to challenge dominant narrative ideas, especially when they're wrong, right? Yeah. So courage is one thing, but then the other thing too that I feel so strong about for myself, but everyone in the industry, and I feel like we were talking about this, I know we did a lot, like around pricing, is courage, but also like we have to do in order to change the system, in order to really advocate and fight for equity, we have to be willing to do things that are inconvenient, right? In the name of business, right? Yeah. So for example, I was ordering my recent greens, and my price of the greens year-over-year rate was increased by 44%. Sheesh. And I was like, oh, I'm P&L, right? But I was like, oh, but this is what we want, because we've been working so hard to be like, you guys got to pick 100% red ripe cherries, right? Hand picks. You guys got to do all the sorting, right? Yeah. And then also like, you guys, we got to transition from natural processing to full wash because I want more consistency. And after that, they don't have machines to like sort materials, so they have to hand pick materials. So all of this later on increased the price of Robusta. And I'm like, this is ultimately what we want, and we have to do we have to, even if it's inconvenient, we have to be willing to do that. And then on top of that, the domestic price of Robusta on the commercial coffee C market increased 148% year over year. Oh, wow. Domestically, right? Wow. And so it's like the price of the C market increased 140%, and of course premium specialty will also increase. Yeah. And I'm like, I got to figure out the P&L. I'm like, this is what we want. Right. This is actually what we want. We need C market to rise so that everyone else can rise. Because what? We don't want to help producers who grow commercial coffee. Yeah. Just because, right? And so it's about how do we really apply these values of care to everyone in the industry, not just specialty, right? But this is where, and I had certain people who literally, even people here were like, oh, is it your fault Robusta's up? Right? They were like,
you've been doing a lot of marketing. You know what I'm saying?
Like, oh, we gotta get it down. I'm like, oh, but
wow,
why?
That's weird.
But why?
Wow.
Something very clear, the three of us started our businesses. None of us cared about coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We cared about our people,
Yeah.
our heritage. Not everybody here does.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then that's the why.
Yeah.
Because we talked about this. I want the C market to never drop below 225. Because what does that do? Nobody has an excuse to underpay. Nobody can underpay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But it's going to hurt a lot of P&Ls. But
Sheesh.
I think it's just the humanity is lost
Right.
when it gets industrialized, when
Right.
it gets commercialized. And
Right.
I think people like us are necessary.
But I feel like it hurts the P&L temporarily, because if we really want to create systemic change, then as this is happening in the C market, right? And then on the origin side, and then producing, roasting, importing side, we need to shift culture around the world around how we consume coffee, right? If we can pay $18 for a glass of wine, why are we not comfortable paying more for a latte?
Yeah.
So
What do wine producers look like again?
I think it's interesting too, because when I started the Anti-Gentrification Coffee Club and Cxffeeblack, they were like, a lot of people were like, you can't put a coffee shop in the hood, right? And then that coffee shop just won more notable roaster in the world, right? Which is a couple months ago, which is crazy. I appreciate you, probably. Yeah, my wife did all the hard work, you know what I'm saying? But it's really fascinating to me because they were like, oh, your community doesn't have the money. Not even just the general specialty coffee community doesn't have the money to pay what people deserve. Listen, in my community, like the Black African-American community can't afford to pay. But I was like, everybody in my neighborhood got Jordans though. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have money to spend. We just don't see a reason to spend it on that.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so when we started marketing coffee, because I'm a hip hop artist first, like I marketed coffee as merch. And so the price was like the price of the rest of my merch. You know what I'm saying? The coffee was $25, the hoodie was $40. Like it was just there with the rest of my merch. And so when my community was buying the coffee, they weren't going to a store and looking at, well, what is Folgers going for? They were just like, okay, this is a dope experience. I believe in what this brother's doing. I'll buy a hoodie. I'll buy a bag of Gucci Mane. I'm gonna buy a hat, whatever. Like it was in that context. And so like as our community has grown, it's actually interesting. I heard like the African American coffee consuming community is like the fastest growing demographic right now in the coffee industry. And that's fascinating because when I started, we were the lowest coffee consuming community. So people didn't see the potential in our community. And if you don't have the imagination, like the liberatory sociological imagination to see potential for what you think needs to be, I think you'll always be trapped into this kind of like, honestly, false story that you'll tell people. You go, hey, we need to pay more, we need to do more for these farmers, but when it's time to actually pay up, you won't be willing to because you don't have the financial imagination to see how to structure a business where that makes sense. And I think that that's something that oftentimes is because people don't see the primary imperative as care and seeing flourishing for these communities, and then you build backwards a financial model that makes sense. They start off with like, well, I want to keep making the money the way that the industry is and the way that we've been making money for the last 400 years, which is a very colonial, anti-Black, anti-Indigenous model built off of extracting labor from Black and brown bodies. But at the same time, I do want to be seen as a nice person, so let me pick this language and these labels and these certifications on top of what I'm doing, so you think I'm a nice person while I keep making the same money that my great-granddaddy used to make. And I'm like, that you just can't do both of those things at the same time, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's backwards. Yeah.
I think I saw the stat. I don't know the stat exactly, but like it was some wild stat. Like literally, like the price of coffee has it increased over the last like 30 years.
I heard it went down, didn't it?
It's gone down.
Yeah.
You factor inflation. I mean, the green market should be like $8.
They were saying like farmers used to make like 50% of like the total cost of what the product was once you roasted and presented to a customer. Now it's, what is the percentage? Like, I don't know, 2%, 5%?
I mean, part of the problem is also the volume's grown, right? There's a lot more, you know, Brazil, Vietnam. But I think ultimately, I don't know, man. I think we're living and still operating in industries that are established from 200 years.
Yeah, bro.
There's still colonization mentality.
Yeah.
In our countries, there's still. I mean, it's. I think one of the things that leads to, you know, you talk about representation.
Hey, we here. You know what I'm saying? Welcome to SCA.
And you know, one of the things that I feel great about, and you guys I'm sure do too, is we have something that nobody here can fabricate or market, which is identity.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people in this industry are just riding the wave of the next identity they can attach to feel different but all be the same?
Yeah.
We have something substantially sustainable in the sense that it's identity. It's our people, it's our heritage, it's our culture, and it's very real. But I think we also have a responsibility. A major responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, I say some things that upset people.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't care, because if I don't say it, who else is going to say it?
Right.
And I'm thanked behind the scenes by all the people who can't say it.
Yep.
And I'm despised by all the people who have taken advantage of the people that
Right, because it's not convenient for them to hear what you say. It's not convenient for them to maybe apply the changes or like be challenged in how you're challenging them. Like that's what it's like. It's part courage, but it's also like being willing to do what is inconvenient for you, for your business, because you know it's for the betterment of the entire collective.
Yeah.
You know? And there just aren't enough businesses who are willing to do that because they're just so focused on the
maximizing profit.
Yeah.
We have very different models, the three of us.
Yeah.
My model is I want to be massive.
Yeah.
I kind of agree on everything because the problems have been created through volume. Now I realize that for me to grow scale, I need to give something up. If I net 9% at the end of the year, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So we're giving up a lot, right? We're giving up what our competitors would think we're crazy. I mean, I've told you, I've had 6 offers to buy the company in 7 years.
Yeah.
The main reason I don't do it is the first thing any buyer's going to do is say, 9%, that's a terrible margin.
Yeah.
Let's get this up to 20, 25%. What happens? The producers less,
Yep.
pay employees less, cut benefits, raise prices, come like a
They'll restructure the P&L.
Wow.
Yep.
And I want to restructure the industry.
Right.
That's so bad. That's so bad. But that's why I rock with you, bro, because you're so hip hop. Like when I came, I didn't know how people talk in coffee, but you talk like rappers talk, bro. You know what I'm saying? No, but I rock with it so much. And you think about hip hop comes from Black and Latin American communities in New York. You know what I'm saying? It's just like an honesty that like makes sense, and I resonate with it, and that's respected in my community. You know what I'm saying? Like you tell the truth, you keeping it real. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's weird to be in this place where it's kind of like frowned upon in a lot of ways. Like even the way we move on the floor, like we playing music, we're enjoying ourselves. We're happy to be here. We're happy to be with our community. I got like 10 people from Memphis with me. You know what I'm saying? And like it's just when you see the looks, it's hilarious, bro. You know what I'm saying? But I try not to focus on that because there's so many more people who are excited and who feel empowered and who feel seen. And like that's the motivation to me. And I think that honestly, when it comes down to honoring your root, the reality is if you don't water the root, it won't be no fruit to speak of in 20 or 30 years. And so even though you don't want to get this work, you need to get this work because this is what's going to keep this thing available for you. Because without Black and brown people, without Black and indigenous and Asian people and Middle Eastern people, there's no coffee to speak of. So you might as well get used to seeing us and enjoy it. You know, because like this, we are actually the solutions that you have been looking for. It's going to come from our communities, not from outside of them, you know?
I think like when, I'm not saying that you have to be from the culture of origin to work in coffee, obviously
of course
not, but we need more people.
But you need to honor that.
From the culture of origin to work in this industry because it's like our perspective and our experiences lend a very different framework for how we want to transact the industry. Literally this conversation, how we want to build a P&L, how we want to structure our businesses, like the things that we prioritize, the things that we're not willing to compromise on. Like sometimes it just takes a person who comes from the culture of origin because we have that care. Yeah. Because literally it's like our families who live there, you know?
Yeah. I think a big point to that I always bring up is two very similar words that are very different. There's sympathy and there's empathy. If you don't know the plight of somebody firsthand, you can have sympathy. That's a very kind of distant engagement or lack thereof.
Yeah.
When you empathize with somebody, you'll go to war for them.
Come on, bro. You'll suffer with them, right? And you'll see that as something where I don't choose to leave from the suffering until you can leave too. And I think that that's something that's important because when I got into coffee, you know, we were talking, you were explaining the system for so many communities in Latin America, and I started hearing you, and I was like, wait, so let me guess. The person who's buying the coffee also owns the shops in town that rents them the fertilizer and the different tools. And I remember you like, how did you know that? And I'm like, because that's sharecropping. That's what my great-grandfather had to go through and escape in the South. And these colonial models, like to me, I feel like I'm getting the opportunity to fight for the things that my ancestors never received by partnering with farmers equitably. Because I see them as my cousins. I see those as my aunties and my uncles. You know what I'm saying? I see their faces.
The industry needs that, right?
Literally.
People that will share that empathy and bring it into the industry. The industry needs more sympathy and empathy to come up, and you want other people. Look, I'm 51. I don't know how much longer I'm going to want to be doing this. I want to see 100, 2,000 of me out there. I want to see 5,000 of you. Like, we need that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to bring some more balance, and frankly, I think it'll bring better product to the market.
Come on, bro. It's going to bring more innovation to the market as well. I guess that's the last piece I want to end on, because I know I said 15 minutes, we long. I know y'all busy, CEOs got things to do. But I did want to talk about how honoring your root actually leads to more innovation in the marketplace as well, especially from a branding conversation. And I think both of you have very interesting strategies when it comes to how you name your products, how you show your products to the market, the colors you choose, the fonts you choose. They're very like specialty coffee. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And how has honoring your roots led you to innovation and the types of products you bring to the market? And how has that led to new opportunities and new ways to bring financial opportunities back to the people who we're speaking about, our family at origin, the roots? Like this kind of innovation, I think, is essential in order to like find new ways to bring in revenue streams. So how has y'all roots led to innovation within your marketing?
Well, for starters, when I was thinking about what to name the company, I was like, Tiger Coffee, because I'm here the Tiger, right? I'm like, Tiger Coffee, Tiger's a strong and bold Vietnamese coffee. Or When Coffee Supply. I was like, oh, but is America ready for When Coffee Supply? I really wasn't sure. But then I was like, Vietnamese folks have been rendered invisible in coffee. The way I could bring visibility here is by naming it When.
Wow.
Right? So that was the first step.
Yeah, and that's a win-win.
It's a win-win. And then two, because Vietnam's specialized bean, its focus is Robusta. Vietnam is the number one producer of Robusta today. Even though it's not the dominant bean in American coffee culture, we just focus on what was like the specialty of our culture at origin, Robusta, bold, nutty, strong. And by actually offering that in the U.S. context, sure, we had to battle a lot of stigma in the beginning, but now our product is seen as like highly differentiated. It's so innovative. It's not redundant. This is so brand new. Wait, what? Double caffeine, double antioxidants, 60% less sugars? Like, this sounds great. I'm like, yeah, it's just expanding the experience. You know? And it's just like, and it's like silly when you think about like, why has it taken this long for a Robusta to really be like even like Robusta programming here, like why has it taken so long for Robusta programming to really happen at SCA at this level, right? Like we couldn't even have a conversation about it. It was like, Robusta doesn't really belong here. But yeah, just by simply focusing on like what is there, and then it's like, now how do we make it a little bit better and incrementally better? It's gonna dramatically change the landscape. But yeah, now it's like we offer 100% Robusta beans roasted in Brooklyn. We offer 100% Robusta cold brew in a can, and everyone's like, this is so different. I haven't tasted anything like this before. I'm like, yeah, because it's been barred. But I don't know. I feel like it's really simple.
But I think the innovation is that you actually, our shirt, we had a shirt that went crazy. It said, love black people like you love black coffee. The root of that to me is loving your roots and honoring your roots. You actually like appreciate and actually genuinely see value in where you're coming from and the things that are there. So naturally, the value that brings to the market is something you didn't have to ever question or have explained to you or broken down in the marketing analysis. You just felt it in your soul. You're like, this is good. Yeah, amen, right? And it was good. You know what I'm saying? As in like creation type beat. And like, so when it came to the market explained it back to you why it was valuable, but you already knew it. You know what I'm saying? I think there are a lot of communities and things happening at origin that are inherently valuable because that's what human beings do. We create value, but because we don't look like the human beings who have been determining what value looks like for so long, when we bring value to the market, sometimes people don't understand it, right? And it takes time for that to be seen. But the thing is, it will be seen and it will be understood. You can literally taste and see it. You know what I'm saying?
I love what you said about like who creates value, or really the perception of value.
Yes, the language around it.
Because when I'm in Vietnam, folks in Vietnam are like, oh, Starbucks is like so weak. Like, it's so watery. Like, how do you guys drink that coffee? It's so like diluted. Like, we like our Robusta, you know? It's all context. It's all like social constructs of like what we perceive as value and how we apply value. And so, yeah, it's just like really wild when it's kind of like, let's just take a step back and just expand our view a little bit and just like appreciate things for what they are. Let people decide what they like and what they don't like. Instead of try and tell them what is valuable and therefore what you should like.
That's dope. And the same thing is, I just smiled when she was talking about what to name the company, because they reminded me of conversations that we've had. But at some point, naming the company Mayorga Coffee was seen as a liability. Now it's an asset.
Mayorga, that was even worse. Nice.
Now it's an asset, though. Right?
It is, because it's authentic, and it's. I kind of took it as a a burden to put upon myself, which is if I name the brand and the company my family name, there's some weight to that that I need to live to.
Yeah.
But talking about innovation, for me, I think there's two levels of that. Level number one is the most important thing to innovate, in my opinion, is supply chain. But it's boring, right? It's not cool. You can't Instagram, renegotiating interest rates from producing.
Yeah.
But to me, that's the ultimate innovation that everybody should be thinking about. How do we make this lean, efficient, and also fair to the consumer, which we tend to forget about.
Yeah.
It should be fair too. The industry forgets that.
Especially specialty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other innovation of being an authentically Latino brand.
Yeah.
That puts the top products from not only our countries, but then great blends that represent the nuances of who we are.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at each of my blends, it's a storyline of an immigrant who came to the U.S. as a refugee revolution and has certain lived experiences that define them as an adult now.
Yeah.
Cafe Cubano, Muy Macho, they all have a story that's very distinctive to me and my roots and my history.
Come on.
So, and to your point, it's relevant. It's always been.
Yeah.
The permission wasn't given yet.
Come on.
So we stopped asking. We just kind of
did
the market and took it.
That's so dope, bro.
So I think that's what's important. And look, for me, it's not about us being the only ones. Everybody's necessary in the supply chain.
Come on, bro.
Every culture, every walk of life, but we all need the presence in the marketplace. For years, I mean, dude, I'm not a very emotional guy, but when you did that documentary that you played,
Coffee Black to Africa in Boston,
Black Church in Boston,
I
went to talk. I couldn't talk. Why? Because I was sitting in a room that I never thought I'd sit in. After 20-some years in the industry, where I felt like an outsider, and seeing any minority, I'm like, hey, it's like you go up to them, like, it's like,
you okay? You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, you want some seasoning?
Why does up? I got my hot sauce
it's just in the pocket. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. When I was doing the competition for the roasting finals, his first ever in 2018, he was the only person who felt. Now it's about 80% in gender and every diverse. And I think that's where courage comes in. Like, we have to be out there. We have to stop asking, start taking.
Yeah.
And we have to prove to others that we have a place.
Yeah.
And everybody has a place.
Yeah.
So just because we want a place at the table doesn't mean we're trying to kick everybody out.
Yeah, man.
Just pull up, give us an extra chair.
Bro.
Let us have a seat.
And everybody's gonna eat, bro. Yeah. Who don't love Vietnamese food? Who don't love Latin American food? Just let us cook, bro. You're gonna eat, and it's gonna be way better. I trust you. Just wait till you get these seasonings. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna love it. So I think that's a great place to end. I think we're about to screen the next film about the Black Barista Exchange Program at Chance the Rapper's venue tomorrow, and we're bringing 9 African diasporan baristas from Ghana, Afro-Colombian, not Vietnamese. We're gonna get there though. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're gonna bring baristas from all over the world to America, to Memphis specifically, to be able to have this conversation. And the reason why I wanted you to be here is because I think your brands embody the possibility of honoring your roots, and how it's not just novel, it's not just important or powerful, but it also can be extremely profitable. And I think that this is important to see, because the predominant narrative at Origin is we need to figure out a way to be more palatable to what people are already experiencing in order to generate profit. And while that may be true at times, I think there's a much bigger return on investment if you can innovate. And oftentimes the best way to innovate is to do what you know best that no one else knows. And it's going to be work. It's going to be hard for us to understand you. But if you can bring that concept to market in a way that can be understood, like, you have such a wide open lane to dominate. And like, I'll end just by saying, like, our brand Gucci Mane, like, when we started that coffee, folks didn't understand what we was talking about. But they saw it in my community, was like, I don't even drink coffee, but that looked hard. Like, the drip on the lettering, and like, now I can explain to you, Gucci is a region in Ethiopia that we're sourcing coffee from. My wife and I were just made coffee elders there. Last year we were made of Bagadas and Adasenke. You don't know what that is. People, we got a documentary who was rapping on the soundtrack. But like, also that joint is just good. And I think that like the time to be able to create that experience allows you to get a corner on the market. And that allows you to generate profit in really unique and creative ways that other industries or brands necessarily can't, because like their space in the market is overcrowded. why would you want to go that way anyway? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to need a lot of money to be able to play that game, and I would much rather play the game that I know best. You know what I'm saying? So, hope this is an encouragement to somebody watching it. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Thank you. For sure. We're going to put the links to everybody's situations in the bio, you know what I mean? Appreciate you. Y'all keep that coffee black. We out.
Coffee stay black, just like me. Don't need no sugar, don't need no cream. Coffee stay black, just like me. Black like me, 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 black like you, black like.
A big thank you to Bartholomew Jones and the Coffee Black team for allowing us to share that conversation. I just think it is so important for us to be able to understand not just individual histories, but also how our histories are intertwined with one another and how we can honor those individual and separate histories while also understanding that we are interconnected. I am a big coffee lover, hence here we are on Let's Grab Coffee on WYXR 91.7 FM. And of course, as a learner, it has been such a joy for me to learn more about the histories of coffee and then to learn more about what Coffee Black is doing specifically here in our local community in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, I hope that you spend some more time with us next week here on Let's Grab Coffee on WYXR 91.7 FM. Make sure you subscribe in podcast format so you can go back, listen to this conversation, and we'll be back with you next week.